Madam Mayor Pro Tem, we're going to ask for you guys to come down and have your picture taken with us. Just so you know.
Ask him to do the Pledge of Allegiance. Come on up.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. The hazards of being early. All right. Our first item tonight is the presentation of the Roswell Police Department Life-Saving Medal. Chief Grant, if you would come up and give your presentation.
Thank you. We're excited tonight to have the opportunity to talk about Officer Eric Frecken. And back on October 24th, he received a call to a person who was down at the Atlanta Hotel. And when in the initial call, when he got there, he found a person that was unconscious, unresponsive. The person was turning blue, was not breathing, did not have a pulse. And Officer Frecken immediately began CPR on the person. And very, very quickly, the person began to show signs of breathing. Later, we went to the hospital and asked the doctor their opinion as to whether or not the person would have survived without the actions taken by Officer Frecken, and they said that likely the person would not have survived and would have died. So had it not been for those actions, again, of Officer Frecken, the person would have died, so he did save the person's life. The person actually, to give you a little bit further information, had overdosed on heroin. And what we have since learned, just talking with Officer Frecken this evening, is that the family, the individuals had been in rehab, had gotten out of rehab and there was a boyfriend and girlfriend in the Atlanta Hotel, and they had used heroin after getting out of rehab. And since then, Officer Frecken has been back to visit them, and they are now back in rehab. But interestingly, the parents of these two kids are what we all would describe as very, very nice people. And that's something that we see very frequently with the use of heroin, is that it really it's not a lower class drug. It affects everybody, and it's really disturbing to see the effects that it has on all the broad spectrum of individuals, regardless of their economic status. So, having said that, I'd like to recognize Officer Frecken for the life-saving medal. Present you with this plaque. We'll get a picture made with this first. And also this medal, and then the ribbon that you'll be wearing on your uniform. So, congratulations.
We'd be honored to have our picture taken with you, if you wouldn't mind.
This one.
Any family that you have? Come on. All right, the next item is one of our favorites. It's the reading of the proclamation for Bring One for the Chipper. And I believe we have a couple of chipper folks over here. They're the chipper department, I think. They're always smiling. From the Office of the Mayor, this is a proclamation for Bring One for the Chipper. Whereas recycling reduces the waste stream, thus saving tax dollars and improving our environment. And whereas Keep Roswell Beautiful and the City of Roswell is committed to reducing the waste stream, thus helping the state of Georgia reach a per capita waste disposal reduction goal. And whereas over 117,000 trees were recycled throughout the state of Georgia and over 9,000 trees in the City of Roswell. And whereas the Keep Roswell Beautiful Foundation, Davy Tree Expert Company, the Home Depot, and WXIA 11 Alive television are sponsoring the 24th year of Bring One for the Chipper Christmas Tree Recycling Program. And whereas this program promotes the recycling of Christmas trees into usable mulch material and provides Roswell residents, schools, and businesses easy access to drop-off sites and free mulch. Now, therefore, I, Jerry Wood, Mayor of the City of Roswell, do hereby proclaim Saturday, January 3rd as Bring One for the Chipper Day in Roswell and invite all residents to participate. And if Janet or Kim would like to... Come on.
Or
Come on up and introduce yourself.
Patrick Smith, I'm the board chair for Keep Roswell Beautiful this year. I'd just like to say that the reason we won this was because that we had 9,000 trees, and that's the highest per capita number of trees for the state, and that's why we were recognized for that. And certainly we'd like to invite everybody to come out and bring your tree to either Home Depot location on January 3rd or volunteer if you would like at either one of those locations.
Great. Janet, did you have anything you wanted to add?
Um,
I thought you told me.
Just that it's really amazing to me. You know, Roswell is a wonderful city, and we've got about 89,000 people. We beat out Gwinnett County, DeKalb County, Cobb County, and City of Atlanta per capita for the trees recycled,
Wow.
which is really
That's
amazing, and goes to how green the city is and how the residents feel. So, and we would like to have our picture taken with you.
Alrighty. Perfect.
No, you're on TV. No, I need to take a picture.
Janet, can I ask you just a question? Actually, Councilmember DiPolito would like to ask you a question. I think I don't want to steal your thunder.
No, that's okay. I understand that our residents can get free mulch from these trees?
Can get, I'm sorry?
Free mulch?
Yes, we will have,
How would they do that?
we will have forms available at the site, or they can email me and I'll send them a form.
Okay, and how does that, does somebody deliver it to their driveway, or
They
how does that
deliver
work?
it, it will be delivered, they like to deliver a truckload at a time, and they will dump it wherever you would like it dumped, in your driveway, in your front yard,
Great.
not on the street.
In your neighbor's yard?
In your neighbor's yard, neighbor's driveway. And also, we will have seed packets available to those that drop off trees.
Great, thank you.
Wonderful.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Next item is approval of a design review board appointment for Brendan Walsh. Do we have a
Move for
motion?
approval.
Motion by Councilmember Orland, second by Councilmember DiPolito. Is there any discussion? Anyone in the audience have any comments or questions? All in favor? That's unanimous. Thank you. Next item, surprise. Next item is approval of Roswell Arts Commission appointment, Aaron Gravitt. Do I have a motion?
Move for approval.
Okay, everybody moves. Everybody seconds. Motion by Councilmember Price, second by Councilmember Orleans. Any discussion in the audience or on council? All in favor? It's unanimous. Next item is another approval of the Roswell Arts Commission appointment for Michael Harris. Motion by Councilmember DiPolito, second by Councilmember Price. Any discussion in the audience or on council? All in favor? That's unanimous. Thank you. And do I have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
One comment.
Okay. Councilmember Price?
Just on the minutes, that includes the minutes, right, of the last meeting? Just had one question.
For the November 10th minutes or the December 8th?
November 24th,
See that on there?
I believe. Just a minute.
Okay. Oh, it was,
Yeah, on November 24th, on page 13.
okay. So the actual, the minutes were from the November 10th meeting, but they were approved on the 24th? Is that what you're looking at? We didn't actually have November 24th minutes in here.
I'm sorry, yes, they are the, no, it's,
Yeah, okay. I'm looking at, oh, I'm sorry, the agenda item has... Okay.
I believe it's November 24th.
Yeah, you're right. It's
Yeah.
just in the consent agenda, it's not
Okay.
listed that way. Okay.
And my question is on page 13. It doesn't indicate who made the motion or seconded it, so I was wondering if that could be found out and included.
Okay. What's the process for that? Do we need to pull that off and wait to approve it, or do we just amend it later?
Which item is
Through the clarification, can't you?
Yeah.
November 24th, but we don't have the clarification yet, so...
It should be in the brief, so it was probably just left out by mistake. So if it's not in the brief, we'll bring it back to council.
Okay. In that case, do we already have a motion for that, for the consent agenda?
We haven't called it yet, so if you want to make a motion.
I'll move to approve the consent agenda with the caveat that we enter into the record who made the motion on November 24th for the item that I just mentioned on page 13.
Okay. We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second by Councilmember DiPolito. Do we have any discussion on council? Anyone in the public have any comments or questions? Seeing none, all in favor? That's unanimous. Thank you. Next item is the Administration and Finance Department. Councilmember Eichelhardt and Councilmember Wynn are absent with an excuse. So if Ms. Love, if you wouldn't mind reading the next item.
Thank you, Madam Mayor Pro Tem. First item is approval of an amendment to the City of Roswell Code of Ordinances, Section 8.8.3, Types of Nuisances regarding unnecessary noise. This is a second reading. Mr. Fisher.
Thank you, Kay. That's correct. It's the second reading for the noise ordinance. If you recall, we brought this forward to clarify some issues that for prosecution as far as who could be cited at businesses, whether it would be the owner, the manager, or the business in general. So it was rewritten so that the business itself could be cited. For residential areas, it does not have to necessarily be the homeowner. It could be the occupant could be cited for a noise violation. Those two areas will help considerably during the prosecution of these cases. During the discussion in the first reading, there was also some comments brought up about the times at which the noise ordinance would be in effect or not. It was listed originally at 8 o'clock. A suggestion was made to move that to a later date. We moved it to 10 when it went back to the committee. It ended up being decided upon to bring back at 9 o'clock in the evening was when the noise ordinance would take effect for some outdoor lawn equipment, commercial and non-commercial tools. And then also there was some discussion about the noise from some of the sponsored events at schools, whether that would be public schools or private schools. I think the discussion was at committee that it was all schools, so rather than distinguishing between the two, we left that statement as events sponsored at schools. So that would take in a private school as well as a public school, which has some immunity anyway, so we just left it as school. And I think that's the only changes to the ordinance, so it would be our recommendation for approval of the second reading.
Mr. Fisher, would that, or maybe this is a question for Mr. Davidson,
Okay.
Would that make any difference on schools where there's a condition on the property already about their hours and noise?
That's a zoning condition, so that would be a violation of a zoning condition if they violated that, so that would be a different matter. This is just an overall general.
Okay. While you're at it, if you'll read the ordinance.
Okay. Thank you. This is an ordinance to amend the Code of Ordinances of the City of Roswell, Georgia regarding unnecessary noise. Now therefore be it ordained by the Mayor and Council of the City of Roswell, Georgia, and is hereby ordained and established by said authority, and the Mayor and Council do hereby adopt the following ordinance. Section 8.8.3, Types of Nuisances of the Code of Ordinances of the City of Roswell is hereby amended by deleting subsection S in its entirety and substituting therefore a new subsection 8.8.3S, noise, creating unnecessary noise, to read as follows. Text of which is incorporated herein by reference, and if approved, this will be the second reading of the ordinance.
Are there any questions from council? Any comments or questions from the audience? Do we have a motion? Councilmember Price, we have a motion to approve. Is there a second? Second by Councilmember Orland. Any more discussion? Councilmember Orland.
Trying to clarify on the timing under exemptions, item 3, page 4, item 6. We've got everything else at a different timing, and that still goes until 10. Was that looked at all?
No, sir, that one was not. During the discussions that we had, we were focusing on the landscape equipment and the lawn maintenance type equipment. We did not get into the chimes or the bells that were used in conjunction with the services, so it was not contemplated during that discussion. So it was just left at 10 o'clock.
Councilmember Orland, I think the discussion was those opportunities for people to do their yard work or things that needed daylight hours, that we could extend it for daylight savings. Councilmember Price.
Yeah, I agree that there was a little confusion because we've got a 9. That one has a 10, and then just the regular decibel limits, there's a demarcation at 11. So I guess anybody who's in code enforcement or getting the acute call is going to have this a pocket dictionary of the times to see if they're in violation. So I don't know if we can make any of those more cohesive or not, or if we just leave it and let it be confusing.
I would say we probably have that in a few areas, but that's more to the nature of the way we go at it than I think it is the code itself.
I mean, does anybody in code enforcement or law enforcement, I guess they've left, well, Chief Grant's here, does that pose an issue to having all those different times, 9, 10, and 11?
And I think part of the reason that we had the different times in there when it was put together was the type of sounds. Those I know are put together based on the time, which is why we changed the one that was from 8 to 10. So the other ones are different sounds, whether it's music, whether it's chimes for the religious services, or whether it's actual outdoor equipment that Chief Grant might could better address that.
No, you're right. As far as having to have a copy of the ordinance with us, we'll essentially need to do that because of the different times, and there's so many different aspects of the ordinance as far as being able, when we use a meter to measure the sound versus when they can't, someone just can't cut their grass after a certain time, or can't have any amplified music after or noise after a certain time. There's so many different aspects to this ordinance that we're just going to have a copy of it with us.
So you see this is reasonable to enforce?
I do, yes.
Great, thank you.
Any other questions? Do we have a motion? Oh, sorry, I'm off track. Is there any other discussion? All in favor? That passes unanimously. Ms. Love, you got item number 8.
Approval for the mayor and/or city administrator to sign a one-year contract renewal with Jacobs Engineering Group, Inc. for the operations of the Roswell Municipal Court Services in the amount of $460,788, and approval of budget amendment BA 1002650-12-22-2014 in the amount of $32,188. Mr. Fisher.
Thank you, Kay. The contract is for the Jacobs Group, who runs our court services, and of course it is up for renewal. They've been operating the Roswell Municipal Court now for the last year. The original contract was for 1 year, and there's an option to renew based on a review. The original contract that was put in place has a 3% renewal contemplated. Chuck Button, who is our Jacobs partner, has calculated an increase of 2.9% rather than 3%. Jacobs currently provides 4 full-time employees and 1 part-time, so 4.5 employees if you read it that way for our court services division. During this last year, with Jacobs managing the court services, the citations that were filed in our court increased by almost 3,000. It was actually 2,910 citations compared to the previous year. The funds, of course, associated with those citations as they came through under Jacobs management had increased $92,848 as compared to the year before. I think and believe that this increase is attributed to a lot of the cooperation that we have now in court services between the Jacobs Group that is managing court services, our prosecutor's office, the municipal judge that we got elected in this past year, our probation division, and the police department for the city of Roswell all seem to be working together much better as a team and understanding more of the process in our courts. Jacobs included in their scope in this change authorization form to consider adding another half of a position, if you will, or taking the part-time position that we have for the 4.5 to a full-time position for 5 people in the court services. There's a gap that is developing between the citations filed and the citations disposed of, which is obviously as we work together and have more citations coming in to get them disposed, the gap is increasing. That half a person would work very well in helping the court services staff to be able to continue to process through the cases as they come in. So the scope change that we have, the $460,788, is for the 2.9% increase along with the half of a position. The savings from this first year moving from the city management to the Jacobs management was about $37,000. Plus we now we see an increase of the funds received of about $92,000. I think the partnership has worked extremely well for the management of our court services. We've received a lot of compliments from a lot of the court participants, and they're not always here on the best of occasions, but still recognize, as we set out at the beginning of this, that customer service was going to be very important, and our citizens are very important to us. I think Jacobs has demonstrated that highly, and I would recommend that we would move forward with the renewal of this contract with the half a person and the 2.9% increase.
Councilmember Price.
Are these 5 positions what we would call skilled or highly trained positions?
They are. Each one of the clerks have to go through clerk training with the state. And I sat through that training this past year. It is absolutely amazing at the complexity of what they have to deal with. They have to deal with our GCIC equipment that has very tight standards on it. The filing of the cases have to be handled in a certain way. Being able to deal with open records requests and some of the I won't say private information, but some of the sensitive information they have, there is a litany of areas that they have to look at. So they have to be trained, and all of them are. One of the positions, of course, is the court coordinator, which oversees at a supervisory level the staff that is with Jacobs. So I would say yes, they are fairly highly skilled. They're certainly highly trained.
Do you happen to know, just, and I don't mean to put you on the spot, but the educational requirements for those positions?
The court coordinator position requires a degree. I do not think the clerk positions require a 4-year degree.
So 1 out of the 5 requires a degree?
Correct.
Okay.
And all of them require the mandatory training.
Mm-hmm. It just seems like it's a huge number, and obviously we're not covering employee benefits, et cetera,
Correct.
which Jacobs is, but it still seems like it's just a high amount. And I've listened to the recording today of the last committee meeting, and I think that sentiment was expressed as well, that possibly we were going to reevaluate or rebid this because of the amount. And you know, we knew that it was an acute issue a year ago that we needed to get something going, but
Correct.
at this point that maybe even though they've contributed to increased revenue, that shouldn't turn around and go back to them. You know? So I'm kind of got a little sticker shock seeing that figure this year when I thought we were going to be looking at it again from a perspective of entertaining other groups as well.
Right. The review process has gone through. I met with the Jacobs representative, our Jacobs employee, the police department, and our prosecutor to go over what the process has been so far and how it's worked. So the review, you know, it turned out very well. It's been a very positive move. Jacobs, and you know, you don't necessarily see this on paper, but for about the last 5 weeks now, we have had that half person at no charge because they know that they have needed to add that in to help with the workload. They want to be a partner, and they know that it is only at the most a 2-year process, yet they still want to be a partner, so they have supplied some extras for us, I guess you could say, to be a good partner. I do know that they are covering some of their overtime. We are not covering that from the city, which is not necessarily the way it would be in a normal contract, but they have done that as a part of their service to the city. So I couldn't recommend anything other than approving this one just based on their performance. There is some savings, as I said, you know, it went down some the first year. The revenue that's come up, even with this increase of 2.9 instead of 3%, which again I know is a very small amount. However, it tells me that they're going to do the best they can with what they have. They didn't have to go 3%, they went 2.9, and they did. So I appreciated that. We're going to net out, at the end of this first year, about a $74,000 increase after we renew, even with the 5 full people. So I agree we'll bid this out next year, but I think for right now to try to change up what's going up there, it's a pretty positive move we have right now.
I just hope they don't want another 3% next year.
I understand.
Thank you.
Mr. Fisher, can you help us understand, I mean, obviously, if that's not just the 5 people, I would assume, or they're not all getting $90,000+ a year.
Oh,
so-
no. It's like Councilmember Price said, it also covers their overhead as a company because they have lights and buildings and all that they pay for. It's all of their benefits, their vacation, their retirement, their medical insurance that they have. So it's the entire process. Just like if we were employing somebody, it's not just a $30,000 employee. There's other things that go on top of that. Plus, it's the 2.9%. So that $55,000 is not just for a half of an employee. It is for their normal, what they had in the contract as a multiplier to move up for the year, plus their overhead for the half a person.
But in looking at the overall contract for $460,000 for 5 people,
Correct.
basically, I understand there's benefits and things that go with that, but is there value-added parts that could come from Jacob, and how does that compare to what we were paying per employee when we were doing it?
It's $37,000 for the first year cheaper than what we were paying. Now, per employee, I don't have, because we had a lot more employees up there trying to do the same thing, and we're not as successful with it as Jacobs is with the people that they have. That's part of what we're paying for, I think, is that working model, their ability to come in and do it efficiently when we needed it. So we're paying for that service.
And I assume they're handling all the training. That's not something
Yes.
they get involved in.
That is correct.
Councilmember DiPolito.
Thank you. Mr. Fisher, you said the savings the first year was $37,000?
Correct.
And they're looking for an increase of $55,179, so we're now actually paying them more, which to me is troublesome, particularly because I was uncomfortable with the margins they were charging us on their employees last year. And, I think it would be wise for us to go back and take a look at what kind of margins they have and, what is reasonable. I think they're doing a good job, and all the response I have heard so far is that they're doing very well. But, they also need to do that cost effectively. And I think it would be wise for us to go back and take another look at their numbers and see how much their markup is on the actual, their out-of-pocket costs. Because I think that was pretty significant last year. So it really bothers me to pay them an additional 3%. I understand some of the costs of that $55,000 are because of the additional half of a person, and I understand that. And part of the benefit of having them is to have that flexibility.
Right.
But I'm uncomfortable with the cost, particularly with a fee increase when I think their fees were high to begin with last year. So I would like for us to go back and take another look at that and see if we can't get that number down.
So that was a bid process before, so I'll have to go back and review how to do that negotiation. What they did, that was a competitively bid contract. So they agreed to honor that contract for us, and as a part of that contract, there is a 3% increase for this year. Again, they didn't quite do that. They were able to do a 2.9, and the $37,000 savings for the first year also goes along with the $92,000 increase in revenue, I think, from some of the work that they brought in. So if I can negotiate that agreement, I can talk to them about that. I'm not sure.
Well, my understanding is the increase is up to 3%, so there are, could be 0.
No, it's 3%. They actually have it figured out in a wage table in the contract.
Okay. Well, our memo here says up to 3%, and you've already said that they elected to charge us less than 3%. So if they can charge us 2.9% increase, they could probably charge us a 0% increase.
Okay. The up to is probably, I wrote that and probably shouldn't have written it that way, but I will go back if I need to and take a look at that.
So am I hearing an interest of Councilmember Price?
One more question, thank you. Of the 5 employees, how many of them are here on a daily basis?
All 5.
All 5 of them are here?
They're here.
40 hours a week?
Yes, ma'am. The reason we have 4.5 is because we shared one with Sandy Springs, but they want to go to an additional full-time. So we're asking for that part-time to go full-time, but they're 40-hour employees. Well,
Thank you.
probably some of them more than that, but
Thank you.
Councilmember Orland.
So the 2.9% in round numbers figured out about $12,000, a little over $12,000, plus at 405. So the contract would have gone to about 417, 418 without the other half person. So then we're saying the half person is worth about $42,000, which means a full-time person's worth about $84,000. Is that what I'm hearing?
I don't know how it works out for their benefit side. I don't know the answer to that. I don't know what their benefit costs are, so I couldn't answer that.
Well, no, I'm just deducting what we would have paid without the other half person, and the 460 includes the half person. So I'm just deducting the half person is worth $42,000 approximately.
If it was split evenly like that, it could be, but if it's just a per hour cost with no benefits or overhead for the half-time person now, I don't know that it's an even split if you just go to a full-time and just put the other portion of the benefits onto that half-time person. So I don't know that it actually works out that way.
Sorry, Ms. Love, can you comment on the status of the contract and what our options are?
Yes, we piggybacked on a contract that had been bid by Sandy Springs, so the provisions of the contract are what we are utilizing. And since we don't know every aspect of the contract, it might be in our best interest to allow staff to take a look at it instead of trying to maybe determine that on the fly if there are concerns that you've raised regarding the cost. So if we have an option to take a look at that, we always could. Otherwise, our position would be that approve it as presented or direct us to go back out for an RFP for these services. But I don't think we have the exact answer, and I would hate for us to steer you wrong by not knowing what's in the contract verbatim.
So do I hear any interest in a deferral? Councilmember DeFlito.
I would move to defer this item in order for staff to do some additional research and come back with some answers. Ms. Love, would it be appropriate to just bring this back to council, or do we need to bring this back to, would it be appropriate to bring it back to committee first?
Our preference would be to bring it back to council without going back to committee if we get the answers to your questions, and we should be able to get those very quickly.
And the next council meeting, well, there's one next week, but we probably want to bring it to a regular council meeting in January.
That would be January the 12th. If we got the answers quickly, if it's amenable to the council, we could put it on the 29th to get a decision, but we could also wait until January the 12th. We wouldn't have another committee meeting between now and then.
Given that's an open forum, I think I would defer it to the 12th of January.
Okay. We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
Councilmember Orleans. Do we have any discussion in the audience? Any more discussion on council? If not, all in favor? That's unanimous. Thank you.
Next item is approval of an amendment to the City of Roswell Code of Ordinances, Article 2.7, Purchasing. This is a first reading. Mr. Lee?
Thank you, Kay. Good evening, Council. What I have before you tonight is a proposed change to our purchasing ordinance. I'll just walk through some of the proposed changes that we have in the ordinance and answer any questions that you might have. I'll start with just some of the definitions in the beginning. We're adding some definitions to what a contract is to include the change orders. We've also modified the definition of goods and commodities, as well as added a definition for professional services. Additionally, for the ethics portion of the purchasing ordinance, we have just associated the ethics portion to the city's ethics ordinance, so there's one ordinance as opposed to conflicts that might arise between ordinances. Probably the most significant change in the ordinance is related to the thresholds, so I'll walk through those threshold changes. We currently have for small purchases or user purchases a threshold of $2,500. We propose for that to stay the same. For small purchases, we currently have a threshold of $2,500 to $10,000. We're proposing for that to change from $2,500, between $2,500 and $25,000. Those would still require 3 quotes. We would then include a additional threshold for informal purchases, which currently is between $10,000 and $25,000. We would propose that be between $25,000 and $75,000. Again, that would be 3 written quotes with a higher scrutiny, and then formal quotes would be anything above $75,000, which is currently $25,000. Additionally, we've added some language regarding purchases above $25,000 for items such as professional services, where we would have written internal procedures for those items that might still come to mayor and council. Regarding our public notice process, we have changed the language to just reflect the requirements of the state law, and that we will advertise pursuant to those requirements. For professional services, our quality-based selection process has been modified, and it is for architects or engineers, land surveyors. It's for services that are greater than $75,000 or a project that's more than $1 million. Again, that is structured identical to the state law. In the exceptions portion of the ordinance, we've added or modified the exceptions for legal services, as well as benefits for employees, where we negotiate those services through our brokerage. Disposal services for our surplus, we've just made that one section, and change orders, we've added some thresholds there as well. I'm glad to answer any questions you would have for the ordinance.
Councilmember Price.
Thank you. Mr. Lee, I'm just kind of not comfortable with a lot of these number changes, and even at the beginning in 2.7.6, where instead of all the verbiage that was there previously, we're now just going to refer it to the city's code of ethics. So I want to make sure that all that wording is contained in the code of ethics, or is there any substantial difference?
David, could I ask you to elaborate?
Can't tell you right off the top of my head, but I think it was very close to being the same when I looked at it. And it was my recommendation to actually just refer it to our own ethics ordinance, because we are a certified city of ethics based on our ethics ordinance. But from what I remember, it was very, very close, if not identical. But I can't tell you with 100% certainty at this time.
Yeah, additionally, I just find these new limits, under which we wouldn't see these things coming through us, to be disconcerting, I guess, in that, when there's whatever, $700 hammers being bought at the Pentagon and all those things that we hear of, that having a tighter handle on it from the council's perspective might be advantageous. So I just don't like those limits, going up.
Keith, maybe you can revisit kind of what we talked about in committee, how that came to be.
Yes.
I listened to it this afternoon, so I'm pretty familiar with the discussion. But, go ahead and explain it again if you'd like.
So generally, for purchases, I'm going to start with the council level. For purchases that are above $75,000, they actually represent 72% of the value of our purchases. So if we were to purchase $100 million worth of items, $72 million is above the $75,000 threshold, or contracts of some sort would be in that range. So still 72.6% is coming back to mayor and council for approval. Below that, the 25,000 to 75,000, 8.5% of total purchases are within that threshold. So again, if it's $100 million, $8.5 million is still going to be bid, or it's going to have 3 quotes from vendors that have provided the service to the city before, or we have identified as providing a quality service. The final threshold that still requires 3 bids, 3 written quotes, is the $2,500 to $25,000 range, and it's 11.5%. So it would be $11.5 million. So the only portion that doesn't get a quote, if you will, is below $2,500, and that's the current threshold, and that'd be 7.5% of all purchases. That doesn't mean that our staff isn't going out and working to find the lowest and the best price, but they're also working with vendors that we know provide quality service to our citizens. The idea behind the thresholds is to effectuate the work so that 80% of our purchases are in that small range, and that's getting the everyday work done. That's buying the tires, that's buying the paper, that's putting pencils on people's desk or shovels in someone's hand. So we're trying to develop this ordinance around the everyday work can be done efficiently and effectively. And then those things where we can find the greatest value, we put some bid process to ensure we're getting the best value.
There was some discussion about certain categories that we would still see even within that range.
Yes, ma'am. We looked at the categories for the 2,500 or the 25,000 to the $75,000 range. We categorized those particular expenses. So during the same period as the previous chart, we spent $6.91 million actually within the $25,000 to $75,000 range. Of that, equipment makes up the largest expense. That's vehicles, motor equipment, heavy equipment, if you will. It also is transmissions that we replace in vehicles. The second would be professional services. Those are a lot of task orders or projects where we've hired architects or land surveyors or engineers to do work on our projects. You'll also see some expenses related to construction. Those would be mostly small projects. It could be something like a bathroom or a sidewalk that we've put in place. Recreation would primarily be operational contracts where we've contracted with umpires associations and training associations.
So did you have a set of categories that you would still bring to us even though they're within that range?
We would propose to bring the professional services as what we've written into the ordinance to mayor and council. Most of the equipment that we acquire today is acquired under a purchase order, and so that's not required mayor and council approval. That approval is done through the budgetary process.
Councilmember DiPolito.
Thank you. Mr. Lee, where is that change to professional services that you mentioned? Trying to find that in the black line, and I didn't see it.
It is on page 3 of the red line version, if you will. And basically, we say professional services is accounting, architectural, legal, medical, and other such services provided by a formally certified member of a professional body.
Okay, you defined it, then where did you exclude that from? Or where did you include it in a range?
So I'll give you two various sections where we refer to that. If you'll page 6 of the red line version, purchases based on an informal procurement, the last sentence, it says written procedure shall include provisions for professional services that may require mayor and council approval when determined by the city administrator. Primarily, we have an internal operating procedure for purchasing, and we would write policies around those kind of items that we would bring back to mayor and council. The second...
So it's undefined. I'm sorry for interrupting you. It's unclear then, the way this is written. So it doesn't exclude all professional services.
That's correct. I mean, it says that we will have written procedures for those items that may be of significance that we will bring back to mayor and council. We understand that there are things that are where we're doing master plans or we're rewriting ordinances where we would bring back the consultant to mayor and council for approval that becomes maybe a little tenuous to write into an ordinance. But we can certainly effectuate in our policies.
Okay, then the other location you had it?
It would be page 11, 2.7.17. So this is currently in our ordinance, but we've drafted it to mimic the state law. So this includes the selection of professional services, including architecture, registered interior design, professional engineering, land survey, and landscape architect. This would be a service when it costs more than $75,000. For a project in scope is more than $1 million, we would use a quality-based selection process where we would ask for the firm, if you will, for their resumes, for the work they've done in the past, and evaluate criteria that selects them as the best for the job, and then negotiate price.
Mr. Lee, what's the bottom line, first reason? What would cause this to be a discussion point? What's the goal of doing this?
For me, it's about being efficient with our staff and with providing service to our citizens, as well as obtaining the greatest value that we can for the funds that you appropriate on an annual basis. And we do that by tiering the structures so that about 80% of the workload is only 8% of the value. So we're going to try to grab as much value out of our employees that they can produce.
And how did you come up with that range? Is that like a best practice somewhere, or how did you determine?
It's called
complete best practice.
I'll call it a Pareto principle. It's a principle of efficiencies, an 80-20 rule. We tend to spend 80% of our time on 20% of the value. So really what you should do is spend 80% of your time on 80% of the value. So we're trying to sort of flip that around.
And I have a comment to throw it out there, and I'm obviously not voting, but I want to throw it out there anyway. On packet page 79, there's the local vendor preference, and Mr. Lee, you can tell me if there's some reason that we wouldn't want to do this, but I don't really know that I need to see a minimum dollar amount on a local preference. I just assume it be across the board, wherever it's reasonable.
I think I put it in there at the $2,500 threshold because we would be getting bids at that point in time. If it's below $2,500, we may not be getting pricing because we would be going to a hardware store to purchase shovels or things of that nature. But certainly we can put it in there for without a limit on there. I was using it as a comparison when we actually have a bid process.
It may not be the most practical to put it in there. I just think as a policy, or however that looks, that would be my preference. Any other questions? Councilmember Price.
One thing that I actually think is good is on page 84, the city reserves the right to split awards if it's in the best interest of the city to do so. I think that's great. I just can't see the great need for much else of this. And again, repeatedly it says the city council may reject any and all bids, but if it's at such a high threshold that we never even know about it, it'd be pretty hard for us to reject it. Otherwise, how would we even know that it's being considered? So that phrase is repeated over and over and over, but there's a lot of stuff that we won't know about, up to $100,000 in some cases. And that's at least one Jacobs employee, and who knows what else. So, you know, given that at budget time we vote on every employee, you know, some of these amounts are in a significant range that I just think at the very least we need to know about it for informational purposes if we don't actually you know, vote on them one by one.
I think that's a practical process. We could print out a ledger of purchase orders issued on a monthly basis and provide that as information.
That might be a reasonable thing, and then I don't know if we could approve it in one fell swoop or just take it up retroactively. I don't know if we could do that.
Ultimately, if the process would be that we would the internal approval process would have already approved those purchase orders. It would just be informational purposes only.
Councilmember DiPolito.
Thank you. Mr. Lee, on page 9, packet page 85, I guess. Item E, it says contracts of more than $100,000 excluding commodity purchases shall be approved by the city council. Shouldn't that be $75,000?
Yes, sir, it should. That's a mistake.
Thank you. I guess my thought on this, I hear what you're saying about the professional services, and my thought in general is and has been that for commodity-type items, we really don't need to get involved in that, I don't think. Professional services is kind of hard to decide what's appropriate for us to hear and what's not. It's probably easier for us to just hear all of it above 25. So I think we're getting a little closer to getting this ordinance to where we're narrowing it down to the items that we want to see. I think we're not quite there, and I don't want to kick the can down the road and say we're going to come up with a procedure to decide. If we're going to change the ordinance, let's decide now. And my preference would be for us to see all of professional services, unless there's something I'm not thinking of that is almost a commodity, but it would be labeled under a professional service. So I'm not quite comfortable with the way this is written tonight. I think we're a lot closer. So that's my thought.
Councilmember Price.
One more, sorry. Regarding public art, I know we're kind of in the midst of figuring out how we're going to provide for that and to decide upon that, but I'm not so sure that it totally needs to be excluded. And maybe situations where a process similar to this would be appropriate, or would we just define that elsewhere?
Is there a page number you're looking at?
13 or 89.
Currently, works of art are exempt. We just changed the language. I think as you consider a public art policy, that's a more appropriate place for how we would evaluate art to be selected, not necessarily based on its cost.
So do you feel like you're hearing enough for first reading to tweak it, or do we have, well, Councilmember DiPolito, I'll let you.
Sorry, I had one more comment. I forgot to. One more question. Mr. Lee, you talked about change orders being included in this, and my question for you is if For example, there's a project that gets approved at $70,000, and then it has a $10,000 change order, which kicks it over the threshold. Is it the cumulative amount we're looking at, or the amount of the change order? Because the way this is written, it looks like it's saying the amount of the change order.
Ultimately, when we initially bid, it would be on the initial bid price. And we would have to stipulate in the bid how we're going to evaluate the bid. And I'll use, occasionally you'll see we provide bids with alternate ads for deducts. We actually have to specify in that bid, are we evaluating based on the base bid or based on the alternate ads, alternate deducts. So the policy would be that we would evaluate the initial bid on the initial price. The change orders we would have to manage more on an as-they-come basis. The idea would be that we wouldn't have a lot of change orders, but as you know, we do construction, and we're gonna run into those.
So you didn't answer my question.
Oh, I'm sorry, maybe I...
Is it on the, does the threshold count for the cumulative dollar amount or just for the change order amount? So if somebody has a change order for less than $25,000, does that not even come to us, even though the cumulative amount would be something that we would see?
No, sir, it would not. But based on the ordinance, if it is below $25,000, it would not come to mayor and council. Actually, in this revised, it's up to $75,000, so we may need to evaluate that language as well. But ultimately, if the change order is less than $25,000, it's not going to come back to mayor and council. And we wouldn't necessarily bid it. We would negotiate with whoever we have a contract with.
I would suggest that we would look at the cumulative amount in those cases, because it may kick it into a category that we would want to see it at that point.
Okay.
Councilmember Orland.
I'm not sure you could do it on accumulation because you've already made your decision based on what the numbers were originally, and if you have a change order coming back, unless that change order really jumped into a category by itself. For example, if you were at 70 and a change order came in even for 10 to put it over 75, you can't go back. You've already had the decision made, so I'm not sure how you can get to that, but I guess for right now, I'll move for approval of the first reading with a couple things. One, I think the idea of informational packages on a timely basis for everybody would be good. And two, I think you've heard several comments tonight from different council members taken into consideration before the second reading. But for now, I'll go ahead and move for approval of the first reading.
Okay. Do we have a second? No. Okay. Well, all right. Councilmember DiPolito, second. Ms. Love has one comment to clarify.
Thank you. Just for a point of clarification regarding change orders, many times you might see a change order anyway without respect to the threshold because the budget is not enough to affect the change order, or there are some other issue that we have to bring it at least to committee. So we do need to look at the cumulative language that may pose us some or throw into place some other changes that would need to be made in the ordinance.
And I think that's an important point, too, that all that we're talking about here is things that were already budgeted and approved in the budget process. And I guess we do need to read the ordinance. Mr. Davison.
Thank you. This is an ordinance to amend Chapter 2, Administration, Article 2.7, Purchasing of the Code of Ordinances of the City of Roswell. Now, therefore, the Mayor and Council of the City of Roswell, pursuant to their authority, do hereby adopt the following amendment. Chapter 2, Administration, Article 2.7, Purchasing of the Code of Ordinances of the City of Roswell, Georgia, is hereby amended by deleting Article 2.7 in its entirety and substituting, therefore, a new Article 2.7, Purchasing, which is attached here to and incorporated herein by reference. And if approved, this be the first reading.
All right. We have a motion and a second. Any more discussion? Councilmember DiPolito.
Thank you. I just wanted to comment that I did second the motion, but I'm not comfortable with the ordinance yet. I think it needs a little bit of work. So hopefully we'll see that by the second reading.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Councilmember Price.
Also, if we could put some attention to Section 2.7.20. I'm not sure that it flows. I know it's been sort of chopped up with less than 5,000 eliminated in the first paragraph, but then greater than 5,000 coming into it, and I'm just not so sure that there isn't some redundancy there, that it could be neatened up a little bit.
Okay.
And actually, I had a line in here, too, that ended, and now I can't find it. My computer is not working right now, so I will get that to you. But there was just a line that didn't go anywhere, so I'll get that to you, too. Any other discussion from the audience? All in favor? First reading, that's unanimous. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next is community development, so I'll call on Kay Love once again.
Thank you. This is the final plat, Village on Pine, Pine Street and Chattahoochee Street. Mr. Wolf.
This is acceptance of a final plat for Village on Pine subdivision. All the departments have reviewed and have approved the final plat.
Do we have any questions for Mr. Wolf? Yeah, can we see it up there? Can you show it?
You want to see the
Yeah, I
site
don't know how
plan?
much of it you can see on the overhead,
I
but
don't know if I have a copy that will show up well on the overhead. Let me see if I can find a better copy. Not sure you get any farther out than that.
do you happen to know how they ended up lot-wise? Was it the same as the original approval?
The number of lots? There are 15. Is that correct?
I didn't
And the
remember.
applicant's here if you have any questions for that.
I didn't remember what the original approval was. Was it 15 also? Any other questions? Councilmember DiPolito.
Thank you. Mr. Wolf, I'm trying to remember the original site plan, which is a little hard at this point. But was Pine Street always intended to turn the way it currently is? And it looks like we have abandoned a portion of Pine Street.
I don't know that I was involved in that. Maybe transportation or the applicant can comment. They know. I don't know.
Okay. I'll just give you all my...
I'm sorry?
I'll give you all my questions, and we can get to that in a minute. There's a sign easement on Chattahoochee Street. I guess my question is, why is that a sign easement? Who does that parcel belong to?
I believe that belongs to the HOA. That's the subdivision sign.
Right, it just seems unusual that there's a sign easement when the land is common area. So it just seemed unusual to me. The other question I had was for parking. I seem to recall we had a lot of discussion about parking on this particular project, and I thought we had parking both close to lots 1, 2, and 3, as well as additional parking over by the park. And I just can't recall what the approved site plan was. I thought we tried to get more, it looks like we have 2 parallel spaces, and I thought we had quite a bit more than that. So I'd appreciate some information on those items.
Is that all your questions?
Those are all my questions.
Okay. If we can hear from the applicant, if you'll introduce yourself and give your address, please.
Yes, my name is Matt Katu, address 5665 New Northside Drive, Atlanta 30328. And I worked on the development of the site. And yes, sir, this plan meets the original design and approved preliminary plat that came before the board. As to the Pine Street question, let me flip to that. There is a slight alteration that was worked through with Public Works and the Engineering Department on a plan revision, and it was actually to save a tree on the corner that a adjacent homeowner had questions to see if we could save. It's within the Roswell right-of-way, but it's a large, basically specimen tree that we were able to save by putting the curve in there, but Public Works was okay with working that out.
So is that parcel, if you're going straight down Pine Street where it turns, but then it looks like there's a parcel left, is that City of Roswell right-of-way?
Yes, sir, that's the remaining right-of-way for Pine Street.
Okay, so that has not been abandoned, that is still City right-of-way?
It has not been abandoned. I'm pretty certain that Roswell owns it. I can't say for sure, but that was the original right-of-way down through there.
Okay.
And then for the parking, this meets the preliminary plat design that was approved with the parallel spots there on the main road.
Okay, we didn't have more parking down by Lot 3, Jen, or could have sworn...
Actually, Lot 3 has an alley, which you can see, that has rear parking, and so there could be parallel parking on the front of Lot 1 through 3, but there's actually an alley that is a dark shaded easement area along the rear of Lots 1 through 3.
Okay, and then what's the reason for the sign easement on the common area?
The sign easement is for the monument sign for the subdivision.
Okay, but isn't that common?
Yes, sir, it's common area. It's probably a little overkill on our surveyor's part, but I don't think it would hurt anything to be there.
Okay, so it's a sign easement from the homeowners association to the homeowners association?
That's right. That's right.
Okay, thank you.
All right, no problem.
Any other questions? Any questions from the public? Do we have a motion?
Move for approval of final plot.
Motion by Councilmember Orleans. Is there a second? Councilmember DiPolito, a second. Any more discussion? All in favor? That's unanimous. Do we have a motion for closure? Motion by Councilmember DiPolito, second by Councilmember Price. All in favor? Orleans holding out. It's unanimous. Thank you very much. I neglected to say Mayor Wood is also out with an excuse. Merry Christmas, everybody. Have a great week. Thank you.